So welcome to Career Q&A Live, everyone. My name is Maya Salmon, and I am a career counselor at UCSB Career Services. I specialize in working with students interested in law and government. So what we are bringing you today is an alumni from UCSB who is working in federal government. We have created this Career Q&A Live experience so that we can bring professionals and UCSB students together. And for me, professionals, especially if they're alumni, really seals the deal because you can see what people who've lived your life are doing now. You also have a chance to ask questions. So I would love for you to use the chat box if you have anything that comes up at any point during the session here. We will be chatting with Chris Bryan. We will also be recording this, so it will be available to watch for later. But I want Chris, who is visiting us all the way from Washington, D.C., so he is a few hours later than us. I'm going to let him introduce himself. So without further ado, Chris, will you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm Chris Bryan. I graduated UCSB in 2005 with a political science major, and quickly thereafter moved to DC, and here I am, still here. Pretty much everyone that comes to DC says, "Oh, I'll move back in a few years," and then a few years went by, and a few more, and now it's been like 12 years. So,
what keeps you in Washington D.C.?
DC is a pretty good town. Don't own a car, live in the city, get around by the metro or the bus, and yeah, have jobs, have a family now. So, yeah.
So can you tell us what you do for the federal government?
Yes, I work for the Federal Trade Commission, one of, the FTC, one of, 100-something agency acronyms that you don't need to remember, but I work in organizational performance management. I work in sort of the back of the agency, trying to find ways to measure what our agency does, how to make it better, to sell ourselves to Congress and say, hey, we should get more money. Look at all the good work we do. And before that, I worked in one of our policy groups doing antitrust policy work and research and administrative work. But yeah, I've been at the FTC for over 10 years now. So.
For those, including myself, who don't know what the FTC is responsible for or does, can you give us the Reader's Digest version?
Sure. The FTC is an independent agency. So we have 5 commissioners at the top that are appointed by the president, but they're from both parties. So it's sort of bipartisan. And we have 2 main missions. One is antitrust work, which is mostly approving mergers between big corporations. And the other side of it is consumer protection work, which is usually bringing litigation against scammers and scam artists and people trying to sell fake diet pills and that kind of stuff.
Wow. So you told us about who you are and what you're doing. Let's go back in time a little bit to while you were at UCSB. And how were you involved while you were at UCSB?
I came in as a poli-sci major, so I always knew, I always was interested in politics. So pretty quickly I was involved in like the county level politics. I think there were county supervisor campaigns back when I was there, including a recall election, which you don't see very much. Lots of voter registration. I was on the Isla Vista Tenants Union for a while. But then I also just burned out on all the local politics. I think that was more like the first 2 years. And as an introvert, having to go door to door, at some point it was like, oh, this is too much.
No.
Too much.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was mainly the stuff I was involved in. Yeah.
Little birdie told me that you did UCDC.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit more about your experience with UCDC?
Yes. So UCDC is the quarter abroad, but in Washington, D.C. So come out, stay in this, UC dormitory with other UC students. You take one class on Fridays, and Monday through Thursday you have an internship. I did it during my junior year in the spring, which was great. And I thought, I want to do it junior year so I can have senior year back in Santa Barbara with all my friends. On the other hand, I probably missed out on getting a job because I was leaving, where I was interning on the Hill and in the congressional office, they were like, oh, we need to hire someone. And then I was like, oh, I'm going back to school. So that didn't work out. So senior year might be good for that. But it was a great experience. My wife will tell you she even liked it even more. She was a transfer student from a community college. So she came to UCSB without knowing hardly anyone. So when she did UCDC, that was her dorm experience. Like she got to meet so many people.
Can you tell us more about the internship that you had?
Yeah, I interned in Lois Capps' office, who was the congressional representative for Santa Barbara before whoever your guy is now. Yeah, there were two interns, both from UCSB, in her office, and we gave Capitol tours and wrote letters to constituents and sat in hearings and briefings and got to work with the staff there. So, did
knowing people in Santa Barbara help you get that internship there? Or having participated?
I'm not sure. Maybe. I was a little worried going, because I figured there's, 20 or 30 people from UCSB going to the thing. Maybe the UCSB rep might be, have a lot of people applying. But, and I certainly knew, like, the other girl who applied, like, I knew her from campus dims or some campus stuff. Mm-hmm. But I don't know for sure that it secured me.
So after the UCDC experience, did you think this is it? I can't wait to move back, or what happened?
Yeah, I mean, and part of it is I didn't have a better. I didn't really want to go back to my hometown. I grew up in the Palm Springs area. It felt more like a retirement community. My girlfriend was from LA. Didn't really want to live in LA. So it seemed like the place to go. And even if you're not sure if you can get into the federal government, there's so many jobs around political government work with trade associations and nonprofits and think tanks. And so I encourage people to come to DC, even if you think, oh, it's going to be hard to get a federal government job. There's lots of fun stuff to do out here.
So do you want to tell us what your experience is? So you came back to UCSB, you finished out your senior year, you enjoyed Isla Vista and UCSB with your friends, and then what happened?
I basically worked the summer in IB after graduating. Then we did backpacking through Europe. And then I came and worked at Macy's selling shoes in Burbank. So it wasn't until January me and my girlfriend moved out to DC. And she got a job like week one, which was good for paying the bills. And it took me a while. I'm not as proactive in the filling out resumes department, I think. But I just signed up with a couple temp agencies. So I was temping at a science firm and a trade association and a labor union. And so I temped at 4 or 5 different places. And eventually my temp agency called and said, oh, we have this government temp job. And I said, sure. And that's what led me to the FTC. And I didn't know anything about the FTC or about antitrust or what they did. But I got my start there and I met good people and enjoyed it. And I thought what we were working on was really interesting and went from there.
So I have a couple questions based on that. So I love temp agencies. I temped a lot when I was in school and post-graduation as well. Would you suggest a temp agency as well for with students coming out to DC or going anywhere and not really sure what they're wanting?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the temp agency at the time paid pretty well. I feel like I was making 12 or 14 an hour or something.
Yeah, I find that temp agencies,
DC is expensive,
yeah.
but certainly helpful. And I mean, it's a little slow getting started. They got to get to know you. And at some point, I think I was just calling them every morning at like 7 a.m. being like, yeah, you have anything today? You have anything today? And once you do that enough, they start calling you and being like, oh, this guy's always available.
You mentioned being an introvert. I'm an introvert as well. And so, we talk a lot about networking, and we talk about networking. You need to know people to get into certain areas. And sometimes that can be harder for an introvert who doesn't want to have small talk with someone or
Yeah.
doesn't feel like putting themselves out there. Do you feel like maybe even temping kind of forced you to learn how to do that a little bit, or you were able to make connections that you normally wouldn't have made otherwise?
I've always found that I always tend to make a good impression when I'm working with people. My supervisors have usually been happy, but I was never big on schmoozing and like going to the cocktail hour and like just introducing myself to random people but once I was in a workplace, they usually liked me and wanted to hire me. I mean, yeah, there is truth to the get your foot in the door, and they'll get to know you and go from there.
And you are a lot easier to hire as a temp to make you permanent than to look through a list of resumes when they don't know those people, but they know you and they know your work ethic.
Yes. Now, it's not easy to hire me because it's the government and you can't just hire people you like.
Right.
But they know me, and so that does give you a big leg up. Yeah.
Thank you. So, what personal qualities do you think help people? I mean, I know this is a big question, work in the government, but to kind of get started in the government, to be a federal employee, or even just to work at the FTC, what are some things that they're looking for?
Well, the FTC certainly has a lot of lawyers and stuff. But I didn't want to go to law school, so I got in there with a bachelor's degree. I don't know exactly what skills. I mean, they're looking for smart people who learn quickly and can get the work done. And I think a lot of the time, getting hired with a permanent gig is hard, but we have lots of internships. We have lots of paralegals. Paralegals are term appointments. So I think it's a 1-year term, and then they can extend it a few years. Those are kind of the easy entry-level jobs to get. I mean, we hire countless paralegals, and they'll help on cases or help doing research or help doing whatever's needed. So that's probably the easiest way to get your foot in the door at our agency. And a lot of those people want to go to law school, or maybe they go to law school while they're a paralegal. But a lot of them don't go to law school, or decide after working with the lawyers that they don't want to do that. So yeah, it's definitely a good way to start.
So in your blog post for us, you kind of mentioned to take some time off before deciding to go to grad school or law school. Where are you in that process, and do you feel the pull, or did you ever feel the pull to go to law or grad school?
I think I was lucky enough that my family paid for my undergrad, so I didn't have any student loans. And I think I asked my parents, like, do you want to pay for grad school? And they said, no, you're paying for that. And I went, oh, well, then I guess I won't go to grad school. But yeah, I feel like if you really know what you want to do, if you've always wanted to be a lawyer, go do it, But I wasn't in that spot. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And it didn't make sense to me to rack up a bunch of student loans on maybe I'll like this, or maybe I won't, or maybe I'll find myself doing something completely different. So I didn't go to grad school, and I have since not felt the need to go to grad school. And now I'm actually in a position where I'm in a field, so I could go get a public, master's in public administration is kind of what I do.
Mm-hmm.
But I also don't feel like I need to get one. It might help a little, but.
Now, if you were to want to get one, would they help pay for it?
I don't think so. No. I mean, there is training dollars, so they might pay a little. I'd pay for a class or two. But my wife did, the way she did it was she got a job in DC as a receptionist. So the lowest level rung, usually administrative assistant receptionist. So she was answering phones at a trade association. And as a poli-sci major, she was hoping to move over to their government affairs department. But the government affairs department was only 2 or 3 people, so they didn't have any openings. And there was an opening in the communications department. So she got moved over there. And it was like, oh, didn't have any education in communications. So she went at night and got her master's in communications. And that really worked for her, because not only is it good to have the degree for those type of jobs, but she also learned a lot about communications work that helps her in her jobs and helped her move up. So in her situation, it worked great. She found a career path and then decided, hey, let's go get the degree for that. And I think that's a better path than saying, I don't know what I want to do. Maybe I'll go get a degree in this and see what happens.
Thank you. We have a student question, and
Okay.
The question is, are some undergraduate majors or areas more highly sought after than others for job positions?
I mean, obviously there's going to be specific roles, and these aren't undergrad, but like, if you want to be an economist or an attorney, then you have to get somebody with the right degree. But I kind of get the sense that bachelor's degrees, all the liberal arts degrees are kind of the same. Like, it probably doesn't really matter that I'm poli-sci and not history or English literature or whatever. They're looking for someone with a degree, but with a bachelor's degree starting at that kind of like administrative staff assistant lowest level, they're not looking for an expert in some issue. So pretty much any degree is probably fine. Now, again, there might be exceptions if you're going into like accounting or something and you need a specific skill, but yeah, and maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. You've touched on this a little bit, but what are some specific skills or knowledge areas that our students can develop outside the classroom while they're at UCSB that would benefit them in applying for jobs, like what you applied for when you first started?
What skills or knowledge areas are good for applying for jobs?
Do you think your congressional work or your any of the work that you did at UCSB while you were a student kind of contributed to your success in Washington, D.C.? That looked highly upon on a resume?
Yeah, the resume is I feel like having those little things on the resume, because your first resume out of college usually has, if it has anything, has little dumb jobs that you worked for a few months or volunteer or internships. But I do think that helps. I mean, just getting temp jobs. I got a temp job at the labor union because I had the tenants union on my resume, and they went, "Oh, union," and they so it can get kind of random. I got another interview because I had a sales job on my resume, and then I didn't want that job because I don't want to do sales. But so you never know what people are going to see in those little random collection of roles you've had in the past. And then once you've been in an office or in a more permanent job for 3 or 4 years, you usually get rid of all that stuff and you decide, okay, I don't need to put that I worked at Macy's on my resume anymore.
Right.
But yeah, all that stuff can help, especially if it's, largely just a degree you have.
Yeah.
For that first job, sort
of. What advice would you give to current UCSB students? Kind of looking back, if you could talk to yourself back in 2004, 2005, what would you have told yourself to be successful in your federal government field?
I mean, I really think, getting out there and, applying for lots of jobs, hitting the streets, and also, getting in the workforce. I mean, sometimes not maybe looking for the perfect job, but getting out there and working. I mean, there's probably not a lot of people that want to, that go through life thinking, I want to work in HR. but there's a lot of people who are very happy working in HR and like helping a company find the right talent or, you know, whatever. And you're probably just not going to know that until you suddenly find you're temping at some HR department and you find, hey, this isn't so bad. So just get in the office, I think. Or
Yeah. Sounds like you're kind of saying like be open and don't judge a book by its cover. You know, I tell students to read job descriptions, and if the title sounds boring, still read the description because it might actually be something kind of cool.
yeah. And I mean, and definitely prepare for interviews and be ready for, I feel like I messed up a few interviews and maybe this is for the best, but they could usually tell when I didn't really want the job. But definitely just be ready to answer the basic, like, why do you want to work here? You know, what do you see yourself doing here? Where do you see yourself in a few years? I remember the first time someone in an interview said they wanted somebody to stay somewhere. They wanted someone to be in this position for at least 3 years. And I was just kind of like, I haven't worked anywhere for more than a year. Like that was just mind boggling that to stay somewhere 3 years. And now I've been at my job for 10 or 11 years. So.
So let's say, you know, you kind of go through your job at the FTC and then you're like, you want to change directions a little bit. Is there flexibility once people know you and once you have established yourself in the government to transition to another organization?
Yeah, so once you're a permanent government employee, it's pretty easy. It's pretty easy to move agencies.
Okay.
I mean, you have to work in a job that they have at other agencies, which actually works really well for me right now. I'm in the back of the house, so I work with all these accountants. I do performance stuff that every agency does. The people I work with do stuff that every agency does, so that, you know, we can work everywhere. Whereas, you know, maybe some of the antitrust attorneys, you know, there's only 2 agencies that do antitrust, so they're a little more stuck. But also just moving around within the agency. So this is my 3rd department at the FTC. And yeah, it certainly helps. You get to know people. You get to hear about openings. I did a detail, which is sort of like a temporary shift for a few months. And they said, we like you. We want to hire you over here in this other department. And so I moved over.
When you say, so can you describe the temporary detail a little bit more? Is that kind of like internal shadowing, internal professional development?
It's you move and start doing a different job. So some details are with other agencies. So you'll have an attorney for us who goes and works for a completely different agency for 6 months, or we had ethics attorneys go work at the White House for a couple months, or and that doesn't always lead to a different job. Sometimes it's just gaining experience, but yeah, that's good.
So I don't know, I kind of think the elephant in the room with being a federal employee is kind of what you went through for the month of, at least the month of January.
Yes. So, and I have friends in government who weren't shut down. Like they were funded and got to keep working, but I was shut down for most of January. And I don't want to make too light of it, because I know a lot of people struggled and had difficulty paying bills and had hardships.
Yeah.
But we have an emergency fund, and we knew we were going to get back paid once they did reopen the government. So I cleaned my house and did errands and started doing yoga. So it wasn't the worst thing in the world, but it is good to be back at work.
You mentioned something a little earlier before we started recording, just about the morale aspect of it, and the possibility of being furloughed again. How does that play with your mind a little bit?
Yeah, I'm hoping all Congress has to do is pass a simple bill and there will never be another shutdown. So I feel like, I don't know why they haven't done that, but it was a little tough going back after you haven't been doing your work for a month. And I normally I feel pretty distant from like Congress and the president. Like, I guess in some sense they're my boss, but they're pretty detached from what I do and my agency. But it definitely feels a little disrespected, yeah, to go back and be like, they don't really care what I do. You know, not enough to fund it.
So thank you for participating. I will reach out to the students who were part of this and let you know how to get in touch with Chris if you choose to, for networking purposes or asking questions via email and whatnot. And we will also be making this video available by doing some editing, and then once it's all ready to go, I will post it on our website. So thank you for participating, and you all have a good night. Thank you.